Making headlines for this week of July 10th. Ohi to austerity. Resounding rejection of Eurobankers by Greek people surprises all. Referendum reverberation. Greece's inspiration is leading other countries to call their own vote. Market mayhem. Market crashes and a trading halt, but all may not be what it appears. And solar warden. Recent info suggests a galactic family is assisting in the removal of the global cabal.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. The dominating story continues to be Greece and the after effects of this country's recent, very resounding Ohi, or no vote, to further austerity cuts by the European and global banking cabal. Given the importance of this issue, its possible consequences, and the fact that I'm taking some time off after this week, I wish to spend more time helping as much as possible to better understand what may be happening here and how it may be impacting our world over the coming months. Let me be clear from the beginning that there are many angles unfolding here, and though I may try my best, I'm not going to be able to cover them all or be able to link everything together in a way that I might like to. I just simply do not have the time, energy, or resources to take on something of this magnitude by myself. Having said this, I remind listeners, as always, to not accept everything I share as truth, because there may be pieces of this puzzle that I overlooked or did not even hear about. From the way things are looking, at least in this current moment, the wave of global change may finally now be upon us. In the minds of some, this change could not have come soon enough. Many have been waiting for it for a very long time, a chance to finally observe the ending of financial tyranny and terrorism that has been perpetrated by an elitist group of people against the human population and our planet herself. Much to the dismay of this elitist cabal group, the collective human and planetary consciousness seems to be getting the upper hand. This group is becoming very irritable towards Greece. The European bankers and their partners are becoming very irritated with Greece. It is the Dalai Lama who has been credited with saying that if you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito in the room. That mosquito arguably could represent Greece in general, or perhaps former Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis, who resigned even after achieving the historic and perhaps surprising no endorsement vote from the Greek people. Those approaching the issue from the perspective of the 3D economic paradigm will argue that Greece is wrong or bad for doing what it is doing. From that perspective, one may very well be correct because it may represent an end to that one's current understanding of how the world operates. Those who are awakening to a deeper understanding and also a deeper human and planetary consciousness, however, are beginning to grasp the bigger significance of what is unfolding, and it represents something that is much larger than merely one country or even one continent. The Greek people are offering a lesson to the world in how to make lemonade. The Greek people were given a lemon, a huge lemon of debt that they did not consent to, a debt they have declared as odious and unlawful. The powerful few attempted to break a country and the will of its people. Somewhere among the lemons, the people started making lemonade. CVN reported in January on a story by John Henley appearing in the London Guardian where citizen-run health clinics, food centers, kitchens, and legal aid hubs have sprung up to fill the gaps left by austerity. They appear to be modeling the example of taking care of each other while creating their own self-sustaining economy out of the clutches of those attempting to force more debt upon them. Before the referendum, now former Finance Minister Varoufakis gave an interview with Paul Mason of Britain's Channel 4. Here are a few selected questions and responses.
it's not clear to many observers what the difference between no and yes is, because Mr. Tsipras offered on Thursday to sign something very close to what the Commission had themselves offered. And why didn't you urge him to just say, okay, well now let's go back to Brussels and talk about this? This is seen by many, even people sympathetic to you, as posturing.
It isn't posturing. There are two golden words that mark the chasm between the yes and the no. Debt restructuring. The reason why the negotiations have stalled is because our creditors have refused to restructure debt. And they have insisted that the weakest Greeks pay for an unpayable debt through the nose, their kids, their grandchildren, forever. This is the great difference between the yes and the no. We have made many concessions in order to sort of converge with the institutions. But this is something we're not going to give in with regards to. We have to have sustainable debt, because that is the only way that investors will invest in this country and have this positive shock of optimism, which is absolutely necessary to lift us from the mire in which we've been for 5 years now.
But you know, because you have sat in those meetings, that you're dealing with two different sets of people. The IMF, which yesterday said you should get a debt repayment holiday and a haircut, so something chopped off the debt. But the people who have to do that are the European taxpayers, and their own electorates are just never going to buy it, are they? It's a no-win situation.
So what we do, we are trying to be the sensible people between the Europeans and the IMF. We're not requesting a haircut, even though a haircut would be very sensible. But because we understand, we're sensitive to the political conundrum within Europe that is stirred up every time you mention the H word, the haircut word. We're not proposing that. What we're proposing is a very sensible, very moderate, very conservative, better structure that on the one hand does away with a funding gap for the next 2.5 years. It shifts our debt to the ECB to the ESM from one pocket of Europe to another pocket of Europe, not one euro for the Greek state, but it makes palatable our debt repayment schedule. It pushes into the future whatever problems we would be facing with funding in the short run, and at the same time unleashes quantitative easing on the part of the Greek state, and makes the whole thing viable.
It's a fantasy. With this Europe, with this ECB, it's a fantasy. Shouldn't you just tell your electorate, the Greek people, that it's a fantasy? Give up on it.
Well, I'm not going to do that. You know why? Because it isn't fantasy. Let me tell you something, which is probably unknown. Ever since we declared the referendum and we incensed our European partners, we had the most interesting proposals coming from Brussels. Perhaps this referendum and the impasse that it represents concentrated several minds in Brussels, and we've had some really good proposals, proposals that we would sign on the dotted line for. You have a proposal you would sign on the dotted line for? Where is it? Well, I'm not going to tell you. It's somewhere in this building. But of course, crucial part of the story is that before this proposal becomes a genuine negotiating document which we can sign off on Monday, the Greek people have to empower us with a no. But what about Syriza? I mean, you were in some senses a latecomer to Syriza, but you're part of a government run by this far-left party whose rhetoric was universality, to represent all Greeks. I can take you across the road to .com startups, which you would have liked to have in that big family of progressive people. They hate you. What do you say to them now? That you've wrecked their businesses? Paul, had I signed on the 25th of June the agreement that was presented to me, and I was told, effectively, sign it or we'll close down your banks, they would have hated me even more, because the tax hikes, the reductions in aggregate demand that will be brought about by the reduction in the lowest of the low pensions, by wage cuts and so on, would have crippled entrepreneurship, would have crippled the dot-commers. So we were between a rock and a hard place. This is what happens when you have a broken down economy, like we have had, like the one that we inherited after 5 years of a self-perpetuating crisis. Did we call this crisis? No. The Troika did. A failed program did. the same failed program that the Troika, with which the creditors have been trying to impose upon us. What we're saying to the Greek people, at least we are the first government that we're going to them and saying, listen, this is the proposal that was given to us. Vote for it. You want it? We will implement it. You don't want it? We will try for something better. This is the best a democratically elected government can do.
If the experiment with left-wing government in Greece ends on Sunday night, was it worth it?
Of course it was worth it. We have lit a beacon on a hill. We have made hope return back to Europe. We have reintroduced the concept of democracy, which was actually quite forgotten within the Eurogroup. And I've been told in no uncertain terms that it was forgotten. Some very powerful forces within the Eurogroup would have wanted to stay forgotten. But we have lit this fuse of hope and of democratic principles again, and we're not going to go away. Even if the yes vote wins, there's going to be an election very soon, and I can assure you that the only party in Greece that is credible and which has legitimacy with the Greek people is Syriza.
A revealing statement, however, appeared on the Euro referendum website on July 8th. In this article, Donald Tusk, the President of the European Council, the unelected and real decision-making body of Europe, was quoted as saying the following: "The failed state that is Greece has been given 5 days to sort itself out. Inability to find an agreement by then may lead to the bankruptcy of Greece and the insolvency of its banking system." The question here might be, by whose standards has Greece been declared a failed state? The article noted the entrance of a new finance minister, Euclides Tsakalotos, to meetings in Belgium after the referendum. The article wrote the following: "One can feel irritation of the colleagues as they are forced to expend so much time and energy on a nation which represents less than 2% of the Eurozone economy." This, to me, seems to be a very key statement. Assuming that the European creditors are upset and frustrated with Greece, which it very much appears to be true, then this question must now be asked. If Greece only represents 2% of the Eurozone economy, why are the European bankers and creditors treating this as such an event of monumental proportions? Why would they be spending millions upon millions of European taxpayer money to facilitate meeting after meeting to force an agreement upon a country and its people if it only represented 2% of the whole European economy? It stands to reason, therefore, that there must be something significantly larger at stake. What that thing is the whole issue of criminality tied to a system of fraudulent debt relating to money created out of thin air to prop up wealthy bankers and other elites, while unceremoniously dumping the responsibility for that debt upon the poorer people who never received any of that money in the first place, nor did they consent to the debt in the first place. Ambrose Evans Pritchard, writing for the London Telegraph on July 7th, made a pretty bold statement, writing that the long struggle between Greece and Europe's creditor powers is reaching a cataclysmic end that nobody planned. Nobody seems able to escape, and that threatens to shatter the greater European order in the process. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras never expected to win Sunday's referendum on EMU bailout terms, let alone preside over a blazing national revolt against foreign control. He called the snap vote with the expectation and intention of losing it, according to Pritchard. The plan was to put up a good fight, accept honorable defeat, and hand over the keys of the Maximos mansion, leaving it to others to implement the June 25th ultimatum and let them suffer the public disgrace. It seems, however, that people power had another plan, and this is the shifting global consciousness at work. The fact that Varoufakis immediately resigned even after achieving the Ohi no vote raises an interesting question. CVN listeners will know that I have been a Varoufakis supporter from the beginning, and I believe I still am, although there are some points that I as a journalist must also consider. Varoufakis came to Syriza as an outsider connected to an institution in the U.S. He said he would resign if there was a yes vote, and ended up resigning anyway, despite a no vote. We know that Russia has been working on some kind of deal with Greece, something that Tsipras was more involved in and not Varoufakis. Why? In a July 4th article, Sputnik News ran with an opinion article by F. William Engdahl, an American-German economic researcher and historian. He writes that the Troika of the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the IMF, together with the Greek oligarchs, are playing dirty in Greece, and it is looking more and more as though the leftist economist Varoufakis' role is that of a Trojan horse for the destruction of the entire Eurozone by the bankers and those Greek oligarchs. Engdahl referred to former U.S. Assistant Treasury Secretary Paul Craig Roberts, who stated that the purpose of this troika is to terminate the fiscal independence of EU member states by turning tax and budget policy over to the EU itself. In light of the possibilities for Greece to align with Russia, China, and even to receive aid from Turkey, leads me to wonder why Greece is even bothering to continue to play the game with this global cabal. Engdahl makes a few points. Allegedly, Varoufakis had previously supported draconian austerity, and that he was the advisor to former Prime Minister George Papandreou when his PASOK party made the draconian austerity deal with the EU on behalf of Greece, so that French and German banks could be bailed out. Engdahl alleges that were Varoufakis the man he pretends to be before his Greek countryfolk, he would have set forth a strategy of Greek exit from the euro, and a strategy akin to that of Iceland, to declare a debt moratorium, freeze all debt repayments to the Troika, EMF, ECB, and EU. Then he would put Greece on a national currency, impose capital controls, and seek strong economic ties with Russia, China, and the BRICS countries. Greece walked away from a deal with BRICS, and one has to wonder why. I am not saying that this is the case, but let's examine this possibility for a moment. If Varoufakis was embedded into the Syriza party, and his role was to act as a double agent, it might seem that he would be welcomed to the negotiations unless this was part of the act also. Consider this possibility. If he was a double agent, what about the possibility of his being a triple agent? In other words, pretending to be for Syriza while pretending to be for the global cabal, while truly serving the people of Greece. Two other wild cards to consider here are the facts that the IMF has admitted on the record that Greek debt is now unsustainable. The IMF has, in fact, given the Syriza party its smoking gun, and that the debt has been ruled on as being unlawful and odious. The referendum of the people has more than validated their support in telling the European bankers that the people of Greece no longer choose to be slaves, and they are standing united on behalf of the people of the world in calling out these crimes. How quickly those in power seem to forget those who helped them get there. RT reported on July 9th that Tsipras was as reminding Europe that Germany once had its debts forgiven, and some of those debts were to Greece. Tsipras was quoted in the article as saying that 50% of German debt was written off at the time, and that was the biggest extension of solidarity in modern European history. The article adds that the London Agreement on German External Debts of 1953, covering money owed before and after World War II, reduced West German debt by 50% and stretched the repayment out over 30 years. This enabled West Germany to quickly recover after the defeat and re-emerge as a world economic power. Leonid Bershitsky, writing for Bloomberg News, however, feels that Greece does not deserve to have its debts forgiven. He wrote in his article that the circumstances under which Greece accumulated its debt are strikingly different. After restoring democracy in 1974, After 7 years of military rule, the Greek government splurged on a full range of socialist benefits, including higher pensions and universally accessible health care, as well as on a big government. It financed a railroad that had more employees than passengers. Even before the military coup, it started paying salaries to Orthodox priests, and it still does so, though there has been a pay cut after international creditors demanded it. For 3 decades, Greece ran unsustainable fiscal deficits, borrowed to cover them, and then lied about them to Eurostat so it could join the euro in 2001. What is starting to come out now, as was reported on the newscast last week, was the IMF broke its own rules by getting involved in trying to save a currency instead of only being a lender of last resort to a country. In 2014, when former Greek Prime Minister Antonis Samaras addressed the EU Parliament, most politicians played the political charade and spoke diplomatically. Nigel Farage, however, said the following.
Well, I must congratulate you, Mr. Samaras, for getting the Greek presidency off to such a cracking start. Your overnight successful negotiation in the trialogue on MiFID, I'm sure, will have them dancing in the streets of Athens. No matter that your country, very poorly advised by Goldman Sachs, joined a currency that it was never suited to. No matter that 30% are unemployed, that 60% of youth are unemployed, that a neo-Nazi party is on the march, that there was a terrorist attack on the German embassy. No, don't worry about all that, because the trialogue on MiFID has been a success. And in many ways, it sums up the 2 Europes. The Europe that's talked about in here by the dreamers, who want to impose a new United States of Europe with an identity and a currency, and the real world out there. And you come here, Mr. Samaras, and you tell us that you represent the sovereign will of the Greek people. Well, I'm sorry, but you're not in charge of Greece. And I suggest you rename and rebrand your party. It's called New Democracy. I suggest you call it No Democracy, because Greece is now under foreign control. You can't make any decisions. You've been bailed out and you've surrendered democracy, the thing your country invented in the first place. And you can't admit that joining the euro was a mistake, because, of course, Mr. Papandreou did that, didn't he? He even said there should be a referendum in Greece. And within 48 hours, the unholy trinity that now run this European Union had him removed and replaced by an ex-Goldman Sachs employee puppet. We are run now by big business, big banks, and in the shape of Mr. Barroso, big bureaucrats. And actually, that's what these European elections are really going to be all about. It's going to be a battle of national democracy versus EU state bureaucracy. Whatever you may say in this chamber, the people out there don't want a United States of Europe. They want a Europe of sovereign states trading and working together.
Fast forward to present day, and when current Prime Minister Tsipras came to address the EU Parliament recently, Farage had this to say to him.
Thank you. What we're seeing in this chamber this morning, and indeed across the whole of Europe, is an irreconcilable cultural difference between Greece and Germany, a split between the north and the south of Europe. The European project is actually beginning to die. Nobody in this room will recognise that, but actually the peoples of Europe are saying we were never asked whether we wanted this. This has been foisted upon us. And we need to understand why EMU doesn't work. Those monsters, Kohl and Mitterrand, backed up with a clever but dangerous Delors, believed that if they put in place an economic and monetary union, then as night follows day, there would be political union, that there would be an acceptance of this project, that the north and south of Europe would converge, that we'd all start to love each other, that we'd all begin to feel a European identity, that we'd all begin to show allegiance to the flag and the anthem. Those of us, of course, that criticised this were told that we were extremists and we lacked vision. Well, one vision we didn't lack is we understood that the countries of Europe are different, and that if you try and force together different people or different economies without first seeking the consent of those people, it is unlikely to work. And the plan has failed. This isn't just Greece we're talking about today. The whole of the Mediterranean now finds itself in the wrong currency. And yet virtually nobody in the political arena has got the courage to stand up and say that. Indeed, I feel that the continent is now divided from north to south. There is a new Berlin Wall, and it's called the euro. And the old enmities have been resumed. Just listen to the way that the German leader of the Christian Democrat group this morning attacked Mr. Spiras. I think it was absolutely disgusting, but it shows the way North and South now feel about each other. Mr. Tsipras, your country should never have joined the euro. I think you acknowledge that. But the big banks, the big businesses and big politics forced you in. Goldman Sachs, the German arms manufacturers, they were all very happy. And when the bailouts began, they weren't for the Greek people. Those bailouts were to bail out French, German and Italian banks. They haven't helped you at all. And these years of austerity, these years of high unemployment, of increasing poverty, none of it's worked. In fact, your debt-GDP ratio has gone from 100% at the start of the crisis to 180% right now. It would be madness, sir, to continue on this course. You have been very brave. You called that referendum. When one of your predecessors tried to do the same, the bully boys of Brussels had him removed. They tried their best again. Mr. Juncker said you would have to leave the euro and leave the European Union. Even Mr. Schulz, the President of the Parliament, who one would have thought might be neutral, said that if the Greeks voted no, their power supplies may even go down. There were threats and bullying, but the Greeks stood firm. But, sir, you cannot have your cake and eat it. They will give you no more, these people. They can't afford to. If they give you more, they'll have to give other Eurozone members more. So your moment has come. And frankly, if you've got the courage, you should lead the Greek people out of the Eurozone with your head held high. Get back your democracy. Get back control of your country. Give your people the leadership and the hope that they crave. Yes, it'll be tough for the first few months, but with a devalued currency and with friends of Greece all over the world, you will recover.
This global banking cabal is desperately trying to keep its house of cards standing, and it does not appear they are doing a very good job. They are attempting to cover their tracks of how they manipulated not only the country and people of Greece, but so many countries around the world with financial terrorism, financial warfare, and then even physical warfare when necessary. Several leaders, such as Libya's Gaddafi, was knocked off by Western agents or hitmen because he was doing for his country what many, if not all of the things that the global cabal was trying to take away from humans to prevent their empowerment in other countries. One link in the show summary offers at least 15 reasons why Gaddafi was killed for those wishing to review it. Other leaders have been killed for similar reasons. The strategy is quite familiar, and perhaps none have told it so well as John Perkins, himself a former economic hitman. In an article by Michael Nevradakis of Truth Out, he writes that seemingly ordinary men with ordinary backgrounds who travel to these countries and impose the harsh austerity policies prescribed by the IMF and World Bank as solutions to the economic hardship they are now experiencing. Men like Perkins were trained to squeeze every last drop of wealth and resources from these sputtering economies and continue to do so to this day. Perkins details in the article how a country gets targeted. Loans are arranged for the country with money that never goes to the people, but usually to foreign companies that go in and collapse the local economy while making huge profits. Once a country was bound by debt, people would go in and start demanding their pounds of flesh, requiring the country to sell off its assets and then push massive austerity penalties upon the poorer people. Perkins says in the article that the people of Greece are being blamed for something they had nothing to do with, and the corporatocracy and financial community are responsible for pushing Greece down this path. He feels that Greece has been targeted for certain. CVN had an opportunity to get a few minutes from Mr. Perkins despite his busy schedule. Here is what Perkins shared with me. Mr. Perkins, Paul Craig Roberts speculated on King World News on July 7th that a no vote still means that the global banking group and NATO still have control over the country. What has the no vote actually achieved in terms of contributing to the collapse of the hegemonic control of the global banking elitists? Is this result truly as significant as many are seeing and hoping?
Well, I don't think we know yet how significant it is. What we do know is that the greedy people have been very bold, first of all, and in doing that, they sent a very, very strong message to the rest of the world, including to the rest of Europe. I think there's no doubt that at this point, the European group, the Troika, and all the other ones that are kind of running the show there, the Germans, are frightened. Greece has drawn a line in the sand. It remains to be seen what will happen, because certainly Greece is in a tough position. But so is the European Union, so is the Euro, because this, of course, opens the floodgates for Ireland and Italy and Spain and Portugal and other countries to question what they should do next.
There is talk about the UK wanting to separate. There is a petition in Austria now with enough signatures to force their parliament to discuss leaving the euro. The German Left Party is calling for an EU-wide referendum, and they are also calling out this global banking cabal. Now that Greece appears to have set the precedent for standing up to the European bankers, will this give greater empowerment to other countries?
Well, absolutely. It opens the door for that. There's no question. And that's why it really remains to be seen what finally happens here. What kind of a stance do the Germans and the French and the Troika take on this? I think that the UK must be very happy right now that it has its own currency that didn't go with the euro. I think they've been happy about that for a long time, but this must reinforce that. And, I think there's been a lot of news recently, a lot of people reporting on how Germany was bailed out of its debt at the end of World War II, ending up paying less than half of its debt. And yet its debts were incurred to create terrible crimes against humanity. Millions of people died because of Hitler. Germany was forgiven. And now Germany doesn't want to forgive Greece for what? What crime has Greece committed, other than to default, which is not very serious when you compare it to what Germany did during World War II. I get to think that all of this news coming out is having a big impact on an awful lot of people around the world saying, what the heck's going on here, give Greece a chance. On the other hand, you got to look at these other countries, Spain, Portugal, Italy, saying if Greece gets let off, then why shouldn't we be let off too? Because after all, Greece did make some big mistakes. It took on some debts that probably shouldn't have taken on. So it's a very, very interesting issue here. And I think what happens in the next few days, maybe the next few weeks, is going to be extremely historical. It could really change the balance of power, at least economic powers, in the way that we look at that around the world.
Are the events in Greece a false flag, a weapon of mass distraction to cover up something else, like the TPP and the Trade-in Services Agreement?
Well, that's a really good point. I have no question about what it's doing that, and that certainly could be one of the motives behind it. Certainly what's going on in Greece is highly significant, despite the fact that the Greek economy is a pretty small percentage of the European and certainly the world economy. It's still significant. I think one of the things that's significant is that Greece is known as the seedbed for democracy. And the fact that they took this to a referendum, rather than just having a duly elected government make a decision, which they could have done, they took it to the people. And the people voted significantly, over 60%. That's extremely significant. So I think that's another important part. I think that what's going on in Greece is very important. Nonetheless, as you point out, it has distracted us from a lot of things that are also very important. These terrible international trade agreements. You can say the same thing about the FIFA scandal, the international soccer scandal. That to me is very fascinating too. That these people are being indicted. The heads of FIFA, as well they should be. But the big bankers who cause huge problems around the world and who are going to benefit from some of these other agreements, those individuals have been indicted because the banks have paid over $10 billion fines, but somebody made all that happen and they're not being indicted. We have to ask ourselves why, don't we? And why are we making such a big deal out of people? Why is the U.S. Justice Department going after FIFA? It's kind of a cover-up, I think, for not going after some of the bigger issues.
Despite the negotiations with Russia and China for potential help, Greece seems to be avoiding this, at least for now. Do you believe or feel that this could be a chess move strategy involving Russia and Putin?
I'd be extremely surprised if there wasn't something on the back burner there. I think the Greeks are being very clever. They're not playing that card at this point because they don't need to. But I'm sure that they're holding it over the heads of the trade. And I'm sure that Merkel and the other leaders in Europe are very aware of that possibility. We're seeing that around the world, too. I mean, we're seeing countries in Africa and Latin America taking huge amounts of debt from China and from its two big international banks, the ones you mentioned, BRICS and AID. These countries in Latin America, Africa, are saying, well, we don't want to take any more debt from the World Bank. We've seen what they can do. We've seen the terrible draconian measures that they impose and the fact that the U.S. has military bases in these countries and has overthrown governments and assassinated leaders. China hasn't done that. So we certainly have seen China emerge in this very strong position, and I think the Greeks probably are keeping this in their back pocket. That's what I would do if I were in that position. And not even threat to use at this point in time because they don't need to. It's pretty obvious that it's there.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, regarding Russia and China, do you feel that the BRICS Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank are therefore viable alternatives at this time for transforming the global economy, or are these merely more smokescreens?
Yes, I think they pose a real competitive edge over the World Bank and its systems. If I could set another example, it's not has nothing to do with Greece, it's Ecuador. Well, Korea, because a PhD in economics from a United States university, knows the system well, said that about $3.5 billion worth of Ecuadorian debt wasn't really Ecuadorian debt. It was not owed to the World Bank and the other banks because it had been signed off the military dictators back when I was an EHM, an economic hitman, so I know that was true. Korea said, we're not paying it. And the world kind of said, well, then you're defaulting, your credit rating is going to be destroyed. China stepped in and gave Korea a $1 billion loan, which had pretty low interest rates, and made it easy for Korea to start paying that off. Once he started paying that off, his credit ratings went right back up. And now he's taken a huge amount of debt from China, which I think perhaps is a mistake, but he's not taking any more from the World Bank or the U.S.-oriented organizations. So we've seen in a place like Ecuador, from a man who knows the system very well, an economist trained in the United States, we've seen him step forward and do something very successful. We saw something similar in Iceland, and Greece has to be looking at these precedent-setting models in a way and saying, we can certainly do the same thing. And I also think the Troika and the Europeans must be completely aware of this and feeling pretty desperate. I'm sure France and Germany and the rest of the countries involved do not want to see Greece leave and go to China or Russia.
Now, I personally feel, and I have shared this with my listeners, that Obama and Putin are actually working together on a higher level, burning the candle from both ends, so to speak, to help bring down the current financial paradigm and the military-industrial complex in the city-state of Washington, D.C. Do you feel that there is evidence to support this?
That's a fascinating question. We know now from the records that have been released that President Kennedy was working with Khrushchev, very much behind the scenes, to make a more peaceful world, a transition, and that's one of the reasons that the Cuban Missile Crisis didn't blow up. There's no reason not to believe that Obama and Putin are doing something similar. I think it's a fascinating thought, and I certainly don't have any information that can enlighten you on that, except to say that two such smart men human beings certainly could be expected to take that route, and I hope they are.
There are many, especially among CVN listeners, who believe and feel that this global group has either lost or is rapidly losing its ability to maintain its control over humanity and the planet. Based on all that you know, have experienced, and are observing now, have we entered the final act where the curtain may now finally come down once and for all on this former group of power players?
Well, I certainly hope so. And it is my belief that it's in the process of happening. I travel around the world a great deal speaking. I just came back from Latin America. I'm going there again soon. I travel all over. And everywhere I go, I find that people are waking up to the terrible abuses of the system. So there is an awakening. At the same time, I think what I call the corporatocracy, the status quo, whatever you want to call it, is, digging in because they see that it's getting desperate for them. And I think we have to take into account another point, and that is that, in essence, the current global economy, which I call a death economy, is based on militarization, which nobody really likes except those who make a lot of money off it, and on destroying the very resources upon which the economy is based, pillaging resources. And that can't last. This may be the last great empire, corporate empire that we have, because it's destroying itself. It's devouring its own resources. How long can this go on? And at the same time, people are waking up to the injustices. So it certainly is a very, very strong movement in the world to overcome, to change this, to move from what I call a death economy to what's called a life economy that's based on small organizations, local communities, cleaning up pollution instead of creating pollution, and so on and so forth. I think this is a fascinating time because we see these two forces clashing right now. And my hope is that the consciousness revolution, which I want to call it that, will win out, and that the other side will see that they have to change. That the only hope is to change. The big corporations will understand that they must become more conscious. They must become more sustainable. And that they will move into a equitable and equilibrium here. I think the other responsibility is that things will just fully collapse and by default will move into some sort of a new system. The one thing we know is that we cannot continue on this path. It's a self-destructive path.
Another possible hint of cabal interference was the presence of Victoria Nuland in Greece. In his interview with me, Perkins indicated that he was not aware of any information linked to this. Anastasios Papapostoulou, in a 19th of March article on the Greek Reporter website, wrote that on March 17th, Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, Victoria Nuland, visited Athens to meet with senior Greek government officials. Nuland noted that the United States wants to see Greece emerge from its economic crisis stronger and more stable. She stressed that the United States wants to see prosperity and growth in Greece and to see Greece able to make a good deal with the institutions. The article notes that Nuland would be traveling to numerous other neighboring countries, presumably to brief them on what was happening in Greece, and then would be going to Belgium to report on European internal affairs for sure. Nuland, many listeners will recall, was caught on tape in a recorded conversation planning the coup of the Ukrainian government with the U.S. ambassador to Kiev, Jeffrey Pyatt, in which she famously said, "Fuck the EU." Nuland's history does nothing to support her alleged attempts at financial diplomacy with Greece, and given the fact that Greece has made no effort yet to move towards a deal with Russia or China, indicates there may have been death threats involved or threats of another kind to prevent Greece from moving towards the east. Paul Craig Roberts offered some validation to this effect in an article from him on King World News website on July 7th. In this article, Roberts writes that if reports are correct, Victoria Nuland has already paid a visit to the Greek Prime Minister and explained to him that he is neither to leave the EU or cozy up to the Russians, or there will be consequences. Polite language for overthrow or assassination. Indeed, the Greek Prime Minister probably knows this without need of a visit. Roberts seems to feel the debt crisis may now be contained. He writes that the IMF has already adopted the Greek government's position with the release of the IMF report that it was a mistake from the beginning to impose austerity on Greece. Pressured by this report and by Washington, the EU Commission and European Central Bank will now work with the Greek government to come up with a plan acceptable to Greece. This means that Italy, Spain, and Portugal can also expect more lenient treatment. The losers are the looters who intended to use austerity measures to force these countries to transfer national assets into private hands. I am not implying that they are completely deterred, only that the extent of the plunder has been reduced, and that was Roberts still making those comments. Roberts notes the significance of the unfolding events and the importance they play to the U.S. Washington desperately needs to preserve its NATO alliance, and U.S. officials have no doubt told European handlers that a deal is to be worked out to keep Greece from going east and opening the door to a NATO collapse. The idea of a possible coup attempt was also put out by Paul Watson, reporting for InfoWars. The global markets, however, have become surprisingly active around the same time as the Greek referendum results were announced. Is the alleged Chinese stock market crash linked to Greece, or perhaps to something else unrelated to Greece, and related more to China moving its own currency onto the global stage? We'll take a look a bit more at this shortly. What all this means remains to be seen. Atul Singh, writing for fairobserver.com, however, notes that the Greek debt crisis signals the beginning of the end of the current debt-fueled global financial system. The choice the world faces is simple. Either it continues to persist with the fiction that all debts can be repaid and keeps issuing new debts to pay back old debts while stimulating the economy with all kinds of ridiculous measures. Or it accepts realities of the day and restructures debt before another age of chaos engulfs the planet. In a later developing event relating to this story on the 10th, leading up to airtime, the people of Greece appear to be reacting to a proposal submitted by Tsipras to the Eurogroup on July 9th for consideration. Sources have been reporting that it is really a no-win situation, but Greece has to be seen as having done the right thing. There is some confusion at this time, as many Greeks are wondering why there was even a referendum when it appears that the government has sold out. There may be a reason for this, and Paul Mason, in a video blog entry for the 10th, shares what he believes is the logic for why Greece has now done what it is doing.
It's Friday, less than 3 days to go until the momentous decision by Europe of whether to keep Greece in the Eurozone and give them a third bailout or kick them out. Now, last night the Greek government issued its list of so-called prior actions, its last offer to the Europeans in return for what they want, a 3-year bridging loan to get rid of all the debt repayments coming up, and a new deal to bail them out, and debt relief probably further along the line. It is austere. It is also redistributive, so it hits the rich as well as the poor, and so Tsipras can, I think, try to sell it to his own party. As we speak, maybe 5 hardline left-wing members of Syriza have defected on the issue, but if it's only 5, he's home and dry. All across the social media, people have been asking, why has he done it? Why reject a deal and then go to a referendum where 60% of people say no, and then come back again and propose something very similar? A lot of people can't see the logic of what Tsipras has done, but I think I can, which is not to defend it, but I think I can. First of all, the referendum gave the government authority, and if it needs authority to do a deal with Europe, it'll be the authority of a government who's had its populist prestige bolstered. The problem was, before that referendum, they always feared the Europeans would simply overthrow Syriza and install a technocratic government of centrist parties and smaller parties who didn't do very well in the last election. Now it means that Tsipras, I think, can sell whatever deal he manages to do with Europe. And by making it even more austere than before, what they're clearly trying to do is to insure it against coming apart, insure it against the lenders saying, oh, it's not good enough here, do this please. There is one other reason why they might have done it, and it complements all the other reasons I've just given, and it's this. This deal is so generous compared to what Syriza actually wants and the election program it stood on, that if the Europeans now throw it back in their faces, I think that 60% of people who voted no last Sunday will take that as final proof that there is no place for Greece in the Eurozone. Many of those people, the 60%, were pro-Euro, are pro-Euro, but if their government goes and gets the extra mile to stay in, and a alliance of Germany and East European countries who clearly want Greece out wins the day Saturday, Sunday, then it's just obvious the proof is there. There's no place for Greece in the Eurozone, and they might as well begin to exit. So the decision the Greek Parliament has to take, starting at 1 a.m. tonight and rolling right through Saturday and maybe Sunday, is momentous, and so is the response of the Europeans.
Tsipras has the mandate to negotiate and try and stay within the EU. Washington is pushing the Europeans to do whatever it takes to keep Greece in the EU. Whether certain people in Germany are willing to allow this remains to be seen. If it is true that Germany is already starting to make moves toward the East, they may reject the offer and force Greece out and towards the East anyway. So that is, hopefully, a reasonable synopsis of what has been folding as it relates to Greece. There is a lot going on in the background. How it links to the bigger picture may begin to reveal itself over the next month or two. Chess pieces and dominoes are starting to fall rapidly. I choose to focus on only a positive outcome that is for the highest good of humanity and our planet, and I invite each of you to hold and anchor the energies of manifesting this for the love of all and our planet. We send prayers to the people of Greece that they will maintain their strength and courage while also maintaining their peaceful living towards creating their own solutions in providing and caring for each other until this global cabal can be knocked out once and for all. In other geopolitical news, it is not only Greece that is playing with the idea of separating from the monetary union or the EU itself. There are the usual rumblings going on in Spain and also in Italy, but in an event that might be considered a surprise, the people of Austria appear to be standing up and speaking out now, calling upon their government to address the issue of remaining within the Union. RT first reported the petition on its website on June 27th, writing that Austrians have launched a petition to quit the EU, arguing that the nation will be better off economically if it leaves the Union. To force the national parliament to consider the initiative, activists need to have gathered 100,000 signatures by July 1st. Recent polls show that only about 1/3 of Austrians would be in favor of leaving the EU, according to The Local. The idea is championed by both the right-wing Freedom Party and the Eurosceptic Team Stronach Party. Joshua Kraus followed up on this story in his article posted on the Global Research website on July 6th. In his article, Kraus writes that calls to leave the Union are being heard in unexpected places. Over 260,000 Austrians have signed a petition calling for the EU exit for the country, and now the Austrian Parliament must discuss a referendum on the issue. Overall, the 261,159 people who signed the petition represent 4.12% of the electorate. Kraus explains part of what makes this petition so surprising. He writes, unlike Greece, Austria is an extremely wealthy nation with one of the highest standards of living in the world. Which kind of makes you wonder, right? Everyone has been talking about the consequences of what would happen if a financial basket case like Greece leaves the EU. But what happens if one of the more stable and functional nations leave? What if the people who are carrying the weight of the insolvent decide that they've had enough? All this talk about Greece causing the unraveling of the EU hasn't taken wealthy nations into account, even though the whims of their populations should really scare EU leaders. The woman who launched the petition claims that if their country leaves, each household would save almost 9,900 euros per year. If that's truly the case, then it doesn't sound like the EU can spare Austria. As for the chances of this happening, it's hard to say. Current polls place support for the measure around 33%, but Austrian politicians like Robert Marshall think the number is closer to half the population. He suggests that many of the polls are biased because they don't give anonymity to voters. Krauss concludes, noting, "We'll probably find out soon one way or the other. Now that this petition has achieved a sufficient number of votes, their parliament will have to debate the possibility of creating a referendum on the issue. Even if they don't have enough votes now, that may change if Greece leaves the euro and wealthy countries like Austria are stuck with their bill." In the UK, there are also calls being made from the British public in the follow-up to the Greek no vote. An article by Michael Whitten on July 6th on the anti-media website reported that the wave of joyous solidarity at the Greek no vote still resounds across the world today, revealing millions who identify with the struggle and have had enough of being bullied and controlled. Whether it is Euro bullies, other governments, or corporations, the sight of a country shaking its fist in a fight for the people while refusing to be blackmailed has brought a spark of much-needed hope worldwide. Whitten continues, "As the country buckles under the longest continuous decrease in living standards since records began, the Greek vote has inspired thousands in the UK to sign a petition overnight that calls for the UK to have its own referendum on austerity. Protests and strikes will take place throughout the UK this week as the emergency budget is revealed. As more disastrous cuts are announced, efforts to build the UK anti-austerity movement appear to be stepping up. The full impact of the cuts remains to be seen, but the volume of attendees at June's central London demonstration show that many are not prepared to lie down and accept austerity. Just like the Greeks, ordinary people know they are not the ones responsible for the chaos created by banker bailouts and corrupt governments, and are outraged that they are the ones expected to pay for it." Even in Germany, calls are being made for an EU-wide referendum. The German Left Party has apparently made calls for the referendum. I am attempting to find the links to the stories in German and hope to have these posted in the show summary for this story. So the collective consciousness is rising up among the people. The people are starting to unite, and they are starting to find their voices and their strength in numbers. In financial news, there is understandably a lot of confusion in the financial world these days. We have the Western media pushing panic buttons because the Chinese stock market allegedly crashed. The questions that may be asked are the following. Was the financial event an attempt by China to push Western markets down ahead of the introduction of its own gold-backed currency? Was the event a hack attack on the stock market in retribution for China attempting to offer aid to Greece? There are no doubt other questions that could be asked as well. An article on the Geopolitics website on July the 4th has hinted that the stock market meltdown was a message to China regarding Greece. According to this article, a sizable £2 trillion worth of stocks at the Shanghai Stock Exchange has been wiped out just after the Chinese government telegraphed its intention to help the Greeks directly. This article also noted that the China Securities Regulatory Commission, the market watchdog, said it would launch an investigation into suspected stock market manipulation without giving details of how long the probe would take or which organizations were under suspicion. More than 20 million trading accounts were opened between mid-April and mid-June to invest in the rising market, and it is these accounts that have seen the biggest losses. Although this is not a surefire guarantee to know the intentions of a source or an article, it may help to look at the language being used. Most sources are speaking about the market events with terms that are predominantly negative, such as Armageddon or catastrophic, or any one or more of the fear-based terminology. Change comes to everything, and this is natural. It is mostly the uninformed who do not know what they are defending, or it is mostly those who have a significant amount to lose who will defend the old system, their enslavement to it, and condemn anyone who dares to speak against it. Another hint is to look at some of the other stories that are coming out from the country or from the region. For example, a BRICS Post article on July 7th has reported that the BRICS Bank is open for business. It is pretty unlikely this story will be shared in the Western media when they are trying to sell a story of panic selling. The article reports that the long-heralded New Development Bank, or the BRICS Bank, officially commenced business on Tuesday with the first meeting of its Board of Governors in Moscow. The board met on Tuesday in Moscow, also discussed rules regarding procedures and the bank's 5-year development strategy. The bank will aim to promote reform of global economic governance, China's Finance Minister Liu Jiwei had said earlier. The New Development Bank is expected to launch late this year or early next year and have an initial authorized capital of $100 billion. In a separate article reported on Sputnik News, this article reported on July 8th that the successful example of the BRICS New Development Bank may inspire the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or the SCO member states, to create a similar development bank. The deputy head of Shanghai University's Institute of Public Diplomacy of SCO told Sputnik. The SCO is a Eurasian political, economic, and military organization founded in 2001 in Shanghai by the leaders of China, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, India, Iran, Mongolia, and Pakistan. Pakistan having currently the observer status in the organization. In a separate article on Sputnik News, they reported on another event in Russia in the city of Ufa, and this was the BRICS Summit for 2015. The article writes that this week's Summit of Emerging Economies in the Russian city of Ufa has marked the ultimate transformation of the old world order into a new multipolar reality where the BRICS is emerging as a powerful financial and political voice. I could be wrong here, but I am observing that those from Western countries and Western-based media and financial institutions appear to be the ones pushing panic or reactionary buttons, while those aligned with the East appear to be moving calmly forward in the creation of their own system that will replace the collapsing Western system. The wise people do not panic immediately and will step back, observe, and take stock of what is going on before making new choices. In tonight's final words, we'll hear some guidance from entrepreneur Richard Branson on this stepping back before making decisions. Cynthia Roberts, an associate professor of political science at Hunter College in New York, was quoted in the Sputnik News article as saying that this week's gathering of the leaders of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa for their 7th BRICS Summit shows more than the fact that Russia is not isolated by Western sanctions. This summit marks the transformation of the BRICS Club into a nascent, non-Western concert of major powers that focuses on their priorities, not those of Washington or Brussels. This article notes what has made BRICS alliance so successful. Through hardships, the BRICS countries have been working out new concepts of collaboration, and despite all obstacles, the BRICS economies have demonstrated impressive results. According to the International Monetary Fund data, the BRICS countries' contribution to the world's economy has grown to 50% in the past decade. The article closes adding the following note. Furthermore, the share of the BRICS countries as a part of global GDP has reached 30%, according to Russian Minister of Economic Development, Alexei Ulyakhayev. It's worth mentioning that the BRICS countries also saw a tremendous increase in multilateral trade in 2014, more than 70%, reaching $291 billion. With the alleged crash experienced by the Chinese stock market, it might be expected that European and North American markets would also take a beating. The New York Stock Exchange, however, suspiciously halted trading for over 4 hours on July the 8th. Gerald Celente, in an interview with King World News on July 9th, stated that it's very suspicious to me that the New York Stock Exchange was closed for nearly 4 hours, especially considering what was unfolding overseas in China. Celente does not seem to acknowledge all the other events that are apparently unfolding in China, but seems to focus on the so-called technical glitch at the New York Stock Exchange and the alleged panic in Wall Street. He asks, was the suspicious New York Stock Exchange trading halt an attempt to stop a possible crash in the U.S. market? There's panic on Wall Street, and what they're doing is trying to cover up the panic by rigging the market. Richard Russell, in another interview with King World News, had this to say: the prevailing worry is about whether Greece will or will not exit the euro. From the stock market's standpoint, this is a non-event. The only ramification would be if Greece left the eurozone, and this set off a parade of followers such as Portugal, Spain, and even Italy. Personally, I am much more worried about the building bear market in China and the planet's second largest economy sinking into a recession. There is no telling the ramifications. What he says next is potentially very revealing. He states the following: China is preparing a huge infusion of liquidity in an effort to halt the decline. Bear markets are fed by fear, and once the fear becomes widespread, a bear market can become a soul-searing affair. Bear markets are deflationary, and this one could spell the end of fiat money. He does talk more in the interview about the building boom in China, paid for with U.S. debt that China is now selling. What Russell also does not point to, however, is the potential actions by China to position its currency, the renminbi, also known as the yuan, within the global reserve basket of currencies. China has been buying gold. They have launched their Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. They are involved with the BRICS Bank also, and these two banks are competing directly with the Western cabal banking institutions, the IMF, World Bank, and the Bank of International Settlements. China has been setting up global trading hubs for its yuan currency in preparation for the yuan to replace the US dollar in the global reserve basket. As well, China has been rumored to be launching its currency backed by gold. All of these are indicators not of a country that is in financial distress, but rather a country that is fully prepared to move forward when the Western hegemonic fiat currency financial model collapses and transforms. The speculation, as China moved into greater financial control, is that the gold market would potentially be greatly impacted. A third King World News article on July 8th noted the following: physical gold and silver markets are on fire as people around the world begin to lose confidence in central planners. I point out to listeners that those who choose to go and read the articles at King World News also tend to use negative terminology there. It is unclear as to whether this news source is truly attempting to prepare humanity for what is on the other side of global transformation, or whether they are seeking to contribute to the chaos that feeds the agenda of the global cabal. There are elements of truth, even from within sources that may be connected directly or indirectly with the global cabal. The trick is to use one's discernment and to avoid judging any source purely for its position, and try to observe the source from the bigger picture perspective and see how the source is contributing to the overall shift in human and planetary consciousness. Regardless of what happens financially, people have it within themselves to create community and create local solutions that will help people and see people through whatever short-term discomfort may be experienced in a transformation, the likes of which we have not experienced in this lifetime. In a disclosure-related news story for the week, I'm going to venture into what some may consider risky waters. Due to the late discovery of this material and the fact that I am going on vacation, I wanted to add at least a little bit of information that might offer something positive with regards to our galactic families and the removal of the global cabal from their power. Longtime listeners will know that David Wilcock has commented on various issues relating to the disclosure of our galactic families. Though this story will not likely feel truthful to some listeners, I invite discernment and to just listen without judgment and see what feelings come up. In this segment, recorded on May 25th, apparently on the Jimmy Church radio program, Wilcock speaks of one particular member of our galactic families, the Blue Avions, who are apparently attempting to help with the ending of cabal rule on the planet at this time.
David has to give us a piece of unheard of information live on the air. Give it your best shot there, Tiger.
Okay, I got a good one for you. I talked about these 100 spheres that have come into our solar system. What's happened is we've had these 100 spheres show up in the solar system since 2012, and they have given the Solar Warden people advanced technology that is allowing them to defeat the cabal. Some very strange things are going on. There's all these ETs in what we call embassies. Some of them are in the Earth, and some of them are spread throughout our solar system, Mars, the Moon, and a variety of other moons and asteroids. And these sphere beings have, as I said, Solar Warden was the breakaway faction amongst these 5 space program factions. The Blue Avians are one of apparently 5 types of beings that are in these spheres, and we're talking now humanoids that have bird-like heads. They're sort of a morph between a bird and a human face. They're 8 feet tall. They have indigo blue feathers mixed with some purple-type feathers, depending on which one you're talking to. And these beings have now given Solar Warden the best technology on the block, and Solar Warden is now enforcing a no-fly zone on the Earth, so nobody can fly in or out of the Earth anymore unless they're permitted to. And there's been something put around our solar system called the barrier, which means that nobody can get in, nobody can get out, and communications cannot get in and out. One of the interesting things is that when the barrier was put up, the vast majority of all the reptilians in their so-called dark fleet were outside the solar system, and they cannot get back in. Another interesting thing that happened is that the royals of the reptilian, the Dracos, that are still here, were willing to betray and asked if they could betray everyone in the Illuminati below their own cadre of royalty, meaning only the top level reptilians. They were going to betray everybody else in their order if they were just allowed to get the heck out of here. That's how apparently real they see this coming event as being for them, because for them, it's curtains time. For everybody else, it's the cosmic springboard. So what's now happening is that there are all these meetings taking place with people on Earth. This gets back to the question of why aren't they bringing this up into space anymore? They stopped doing that in the 1950s and early 1960s, but now it's happening again. People are being contacted, people are being brought up into space, and there's hundreds and hundreds of people apparently are being brought up there in advance of this big mass arrest thing that is going to happen. We're going to see the Illuminati exposed. We're going to see their plans exposed. It's going to be the greatest wake-up call. It's probably going to end up being called the Illuminati Tribunals. It's going to be all over TV. It's what everybody's going to be talking about. Probably once this happens, you're not going to hear any Lady Gaga or Katy Perry or any of that type of music being played on the radio when you walk into a restaurant or a grocery store, because people are going to know now what was going on. There's going to be a huge backlash against this stuff. You're going to see heads of state, major celebrities, major world leaders, as well as shadowy international bankers being brought out on trial. Many of the top-level witnesses, who are the people that can bring down the cabal, have already been brought off planet because they are in such danger from the cabal and from the angry public that they are being held off planet, so that when these mass arrests and the tribunals take place, they will be testifying from a secure location, meaning not on Earth. The cabal is trying to find a place to hide, but there's nowhere they can go where they're not going to be picked up. Apparently, a lot of them are planning on moving to Brazil. They do sort of have this militarized nation within Brazil. It's sort of like a separate nation state, 12-mile perimeter, all border militarized stuff with like a little green zone inside where they all have these houses. A lot of them apparently have moved all their stuff there already. They're expecting this thing to happen anytime. And I've been hearing this over and over again, and it is like the boy who cried wolf, and it upsets me because I'm out there defending the alliance. I don't get to talk to anybody in it directly. It's all on a need-to-know basis, and I'm apparently not at a level where I need to know who these people are yet. But Corey is meeting with them regularly, and so I'm getting now a lot more specific details. I'm able to ask questions. I'm able to interact with them. I ask them something. They give me the information. And what they are telling me is, for God's sake, David, get off your ass, hurry to F up, do as much as you can to release this stuff as fast as you can, because it's all coming to a head very, very soon. And one of the most juicy things that I was just told, somebody said they want new information, is that within the next 6 months, where we're going to be 6 months from now apparently is very different than where it is right now. And everything is going to accelerate to warp drive over the course of the next 6 months. That's what I'm hearing. So I hope it's true. I'd love to see that it comes true.
It sounds like you were describing Thoth, too. Were you?
Yeah, well, that is an earlier example of these same beings. Yeah, absolutely.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
They came back. They were back there during the time of ancient Egypt. That you see cave paintings of these humanoids with bird heads, and they came back. And they are here to make sure that this whole thing goes smoothly. They brought in these 100-plus spheres. They're basically energy balancers. They make sure that our solar system isn't going to have a catastrophe, so that it modulates the energy increase as it's happening and keeps everything smooth. They're keeping this thing very carefully balanced. The cabal is not going to be allowed to do mass depopulation. They're not going to be allowed to do mass atrocities. They try and try and try.
Right.
But they're not going to be allowed to do it.
In the show summary, there will be a few links to Solar Warden for those who need or want a refresher on this program. There are apparently 5 different secret space programs, and they have been spoken about by a source by the name of Corey Goode. CVN was briefly in contact with Goode a few months back, and an attempt to reply to an email from Goode returned a rejection, so it is unclear what went wrong. Perhaps upon my return from vacation, I may be able to share a bit more information from Corey Goode regarding the disclosure of our galactic families. Finally, in health-related news this week, I'd like to look at a bit of information from 2 messages relating to the energies on the planet at this time and how they are manifesting and contributing to global change on various levels. Of course, many people are finally beginning to see change happening at this level I call the bigger picture. This is the expansion of awareness beyond the reality that we have been enslaved and indebted to begin to grasp the realization of the lies, frauds, and crimes that have been committed against humanity and our planet. A lot of this realization, it could be argued, however, is coming because of a shift that is taking place in what I call the bigger picture. This is the energetic shifts taking place from the molecular level or micro level within our bodies to our solar system and universe, the macro level. There is a shift happening within human and planetary consciousness, and it is this shift that is pushing the changes we are all experiencing in our own ways at this time towards a deeper understanding of who we are. Celia Fenn, on her Star Child Global website on July 6th, shared the following. July promises to be a month filled with changes, transitions, and new beginnings. You will feel these changes and transitions deep in your own being, but you will also see many changes occurring on the outer or social levels. The new Earth soul is birthing into manifestation on the planet with the assistance of the Diamond Crystal Children, and so a new society and a new way of being is also being birthed that will meet your deep desire to live at a higher level of consciousness and being. The month of July also brings you to the planetary New Year on the 26th of July and the Day Out of Time on the July 25th, the day before. This is the moment that the ancients understood that powerful cosmic and galactic cycles were completed and initiated in relation to the Earth. The Day Out of Time is that moment before the new cycles start, and you are encouraged to spend the day in playful creativity, allowing the old to end and the new to begin. Decide for yourself what you need to release and what you need to begin as a new cycle, as you enter into this new cycle of powerful new beginnings. Fenn adds that it is not something that is outside of you, but rather it is a deep longing to birth something new that arises in your heart and is expressed by your soul in the world. Follow your instincts, your inner voice, and your creativity. Follow the whispers and the promptings of your soul as you birth a new way of being in the world that flows from your trust in the guidance of your higher self and the flow of divine wisdom in your life and on the earth. Emmanuel Dogger, on his blog page for this month, has written that at the beginning of July, the planets Venus and Jupiter appeared closer to one another than they have in a very long time. This is usually called a conjunction, and it creates a powerful portal for extraordinary change to occur. The Venus-Jupiter conjunction was able to redirect us back through divine inner guidance and synchronicity toward the fulfillment of our deepest and most authentic desires. Our path is being made fully clear. The energies are helping us know what direction we'd like to move in next. The Venus-Jupiter conjunction gave us a preview to the upcoming Venus retrograde from July 25th to September the 6th. Venus refines and restores the true values of life when it is in retrograde, so those 6 weeks will be an amazing time of beautiful expansion. He adds the following: on the world stage, we've seen massive shifts occur in what it means for humanity to have respect for all people, no matter what their race, gender, sexual orientation, culture, or background might be. Yes, we definitely have a ways to go yet, but big leaps have been made in how we treat one another. The collective is beginning to see that at our core, we are all the same. In the coming months, many more empowering surprises will make their way into our lives and onto the world stage. Specifically, many of the seeds that are being planted now will come to fruition in October and November. Dogger feels that this next wave of awakening may show up in people's lives in the following ways. We are feeling a strong desire to align with all things that strengthen our connection to spirit. Deeply rooted memories and belief systems we've carried from the past are now surfacing. We are experiencing daily synchronicities and moments of déjà vu. Our inner seeing, feeling, hearing, and knowing are laser sharp. We are becoming highly aware and mindful of our surroundings. We're having lucid dreams that feel very real, almost as if we're living in other worlds simultaneously to being in this one. New ideas are blossoming that may impact the direction of our personal and professional lives. We're increasingly living out loud more by expressing ourselves more fully and no longer hiding who we are. We're building new soul friendships and connections while releasing those that may not be aligned with the love and mutual support we desire. We're sometimes feeling a bit more moody and irritable than usual. We're experiencing vertigo and or inner ear ringing. We're seeing a shift in our eating habits. We have a desire to look up at the stars more often. The energies are moving humanity and the planet collectively forward, and each individual has the choice to embrace or resist this change. Observe your life path over the coming 2 months. When you make a choice and follow it, observe the consequences of the choice and how they make you feel. Is the new relation with someone or is the new job as fulfilling as you originally thought? Is it contributing to your health, your joy, and your service, or is it taking away? These could be guidelines to look for over the coming few months to see if you are in alignment with some of the awakening waves described by Dogger. Though the mainstream media continues to try to hide it, cracks within the media are appearing. Though politicians and lawyers try to hide it, cracks are appearing to break their power and control. Though bankers try to hide it, the human consciousness appears to be moving forward regardless, even if there are bumps and challenges along the way. With her FYI segment for this week, Alice Coppers returns, this week focusing a bit more on the issues of the controls relating to patented medicine.
Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about patented medicine in America, but I need to mention from last week, we talked a lot about food and how the food industry has been taken over by corporations, and these corporations have put things in our food that make us very low pH and very susceptible to virus, bacteria, and disease. As soon as you become dependent on the food industry and their imports, then the country is taken over by the banks, and this is exactly what happened to the Soviet Union in the early 1990s, right before the Soviet Union fell apart. The collapse of their economy was started by being dependent on foreign food. That being said, the second thing I wanted to mention is that in America we operate under a dual legal system. The first system is the constitutional law, and the second system I call the New World Order corporate law. Patented medicine falls under that category. In 1987, the American Medical Association was convicted of conspiracy to destroy and eliminate the chiropractic profession. The AMA fought this in court over 12 years, paid their lawyers millions of dollars. Also convicted were the American College of Surgeons and the American College of Radiologists. Secret files were first leaked to the press by an anonymous source then known as Sore Throat, who turned out to be an angered member from the Church of Scientology. The AMA had called the church a menace to mental health. Thus, the church retaliated by releasing a wealth of damning evidence that saturated mass media in 1968. Documents were then forwarded to the Federal Trade Commission for antitrust action under the Sherman Antitrust Act. The evidence in the case showed that the chiropractic care proved to be twice as effective as standard medical care during high pain conditions. This was the third conviction for the AMA, the first being in 1937 and the second being 1982, and the current in 1987 was upheld, all of them, by the Supreme Court. Next, the National Cancer Institute and the Food and Drug Administration, which is a $110 billion a year industry, the cancer industry. Now, these are stats from 1997, so these are very old stats. But the Cancer Institute has $110 billion a year cancer industry. Global sales of chemo drugs in 1997 were $30.9 billion for the world, $12 billion for the U.S. Chemotherapy is highly monopolized by Big Pharma, especially the Bristol-Myers Squibb group, which controls 50% of the world's chemo market. Now remember, this is old data. This is 20 years old, so they may have more now. Bristol-Myers Squibb shares interlocking board of director members with Sloan Kettering Memorial Hospital. Now this is the biggest cancer hospital in the U.S. In 1924, Sloan Kettering had first introduced radiation treatment for cancer, and it was its smallest source of income. However, by 1970, 73,000 people had received radiation treatment per year, generating $2.5 billion annually. Cornelius Rhodes launched this cancer program at Sloan Kettering Memorial and founded patent medicine in the 1940s. Patents are key because they provide a 17-year exclusive clause in their license. These prohibitively expensive games exclude only the biggest players, corporations. Though a small circle of corporations holds all the patents on cancer drugs for private profit, almost all the research and development comes from taxpayer dollars awarded from federal government, National Cancer Institute, through grants to college institutions. In 1971, the National Cancer Institute had a budget of $1.5 billion. In 1971, when you could still buy a house for $20,000, they had a budget of $1.5 billion. The development of Taxol by Bristol-Myers Squibb nets nearly $1 billion a year. And the National Cancer Institute funded $32 million of that from taxpayers to test and develop the taxable drug. Currently, the drug sells for 40 times its cost to manufacture. The two presidents who started the Sloan Kettering Hospital Cancer Institute were recruited from General Motors. They were Alfred Sloan and Charles Kettering. He was the vice president, Alfred was the president. And they had contributed several million to new research and to develop a research center at the hospital in 1945. So thinking about all of this, the patents were developed more than 75 years ago for viruses and diseases and the immunizations to so-called prevent them and the cures to radiate and cure them for 75 years have been the only choice we've had in this country. I thank you so much for listening and have a great week.
FYI is researched and written by Alice Coppers. The information and views shared by her are her own and may or may not necessarily reflect the views of CVN. As always, discernment is required with this newscast and any information contained within it. In an announcement for this week, as I mentioned to listeners last week, I am choosing to take a vacation for several weeks to focus on my health and hopefully be away from the computer and the news. It seems, however, that global events are starting to really move forward now, so it remains to be seen as to whether or not I will actually get to stay on vacation. It is my intention, as much as possible, to avoid coming back on the air. It is a break that I feel is much needed at this time. At the moment, I am expecting to return with the newscast on August 14th. Many of you have been followers of the newscast for a long period of time and have made a point of sharing 60 to 90 minutes each week with me. As I suggested last week, perhaps it may benefit you to use that same time to focus on yourself and to do something that is meaningful for you and will help bring greater peace, joy, and love into your own world. I have no major plans. As I said last week, I will be spending some time in Stockholm, riding a bicycle, swimming, and perhaps playing some tennis and badminton. I feel a need to strengthen, rejuvenate, and energize this physical vessel that is allowing me to take this journey. Thank you for allowing me this time. I extend my gratitude to Alice Coppers for her ongoing contribution to the newscast, and also to Gordon Valentin for his production of the newscast video that appears on the CVN YouTube channel. I extend also a very special thank you to Patrick in Germany for his recent support of CVN that may allow me to do one or two things to contribute to my health at this time. I am, however, very grateful to several others who have shared a bit of support also to CVN during the first half of this year. Perhaps upon my return we will find ourselves completely in the middle of the changes that will finally help to bring greater health, abundance, and freedom from debt and the enslavement to this global cabal. May it be so, for the highest good of all. And in this week's final words, As I go off on vacation now, I find myself wondering what might be the best words that I can leave you with this week. This is a bit challenging because even though it is starting to become abundantly clear to most around the world, incredible changes have not only begun, but they are becoming more visible to those who were unable to see the changes because they were not following the sources of information attempting to share this information. At the same time, other sources of information have attempted to be sincere in their desire to share information, but may have inadvertently fallen into an unintended trap of disinformation. Others still have been deliberate in their attempts to share disinformation. It is neither our place nor our purpose to judge others for choices they are making or for the choices made by oneself to follow those other sources of information. Regular listeners will know that I ask people not to accept the news I share as truth unless it feels that it is right in your heart. Truth is something that is always relative to each individual in any moment of now. Truth changes, and it appears we are now entering a more visible and more public phase where many people may experience what they formerly knew as truth being shaken to its core, and will therefore have to be replaced with some kind of new truth. That new truth experienced by each individual may not be exactly the same as the truth held by any other individual. It is uniquely different, and yet it is equally beautiful. The question is whether or not that truth reaches out during these times of confusion, frustration, anger, fear, and separation, and contributes to manifesting an end to all of the above and so much more. We do not know the soul contracts or the life paths of others, and therefore it is not our place to dictate how another serves humanity and our planet during a period of transformation into something that humanity has not consciously experienced in this physical lifetime, although it could be argued that we all have participated in similar events over various lifetimes. As these changes become more public, individuals are going to make varying choices, but those choices will come down to basically two things: choices made from fear and separation, or choices made from love and service to humanity and our planet. Choosing to be love and service where love and service have not been present is indeed very hard, but it is what we are being called to be. It is especially more so as these changes become public and the general populations slip into greater confusion as they realize the world they once knew is in the process of being shaken down. Leaders will be required to answer the call if there are periods of chaos and confusion. Last January, I ran a story about the Greek people and how they are dealing with their crisis, and I mentioned this earlier in the newscast. Health clinics popping up, doctors volunteering their time treating people who could not otherwise afford treatment. As well, there are over 400 citizen-run groups popping up in Greece, maybe even more by now. Food solidarity centers, social kitchens, cooperatives, without the middlemen distribution networks for fresh produce, legal aid hubs, education classes that have emerged in response to the near collapse of Greece. Christos Giovanopoulos of the Solidarity for All organization in Athens noted that Greece's solidarity movement was fostering almost a different sense of what politics should be, a politics from the bottom up that starts with real people's needs. It's a practical critique of the empty, top-down representational politics our traditional parties practice. It's kind of a whole new model, actually, and it's working. Greece is modeling the change we all need to be during this transition and transformation. They took the lemon they were given and they made lemonade. It is unclear how the next 4 weeks will progress, assuming I am able to take vacation for that long. If things do become a ball of confusion, it will be important for strong, clear-thinking, empowered individuals to bring together people into communities and find ways to help and serve each other and pass along knowledge and skills in their service with others and to others. without giving in to the fear that the global cabal is attempting to create. Creating new communities based on the skills that others have and are willing to share will see humanity through the removal of this group that has enslaved and controlled us. We do not have to play the game of fear, vengeance, or violent revolution. If, however, it is necessary, some souls will answer that call, but for the rest, create a support and nurturing network to the best of your ability. I read an article recently by Richard Branson. About 6 years ago, I came very close to meeting with him as he was in my hometown in Canada, numerous times actually. At one point, it came down to some bad weather and an attempted phone call from him. I had offered to buy him lunch in my hometown. Perhaps it was just not meant to be, at least at that time. I still have an email from him saying that he was allegedly paying attention to my work. This was before Cosmic Vision News. I hope that someday I will still have a chance to sit and talk with him about global change, as I feel I have something meaningful to share regarding the future vision for humanity and our planet. This article was posted on the news feed for a social media network called LinkedIn. Some of what he wrote may be very relevant for the changes we are going through and what may be expected of leaders during these changes. Branson writes that one of the most important skills any leader can learn is when to be decisive and when to take a step back and look at the wider picture before making the big calls. In times of turmoil, excitement, rapid growth, or crisis, there will be more decisions to make than usual and less time to make them. There will also be an impossible, irresistible temptation to make these decisions as quickly as possible. A leader must be calm, confident in his choices, visible to his team and their customers, and in control of the situation. However, this doesn't mean rushing in and jumping to rash conclusions before knowing all the facts. Even when we think we know all the facts and figures and have viewed every angle of a given scenario, the truth about a situation can be a big surprise. This is one of the things that makes life so exciting. Just when we think we understand something, we learn something new. Branson notes that making choices or choosing to wait has mixed blessings. Sometimes one misses great opportunities, but at the same time, one may miss several potential disasters. I have been trying to follow this line of thinking with CVN. I have been asked why I am not reporting some stories and why I am reporting other stories. Sometimes I do not have an answer, but I perhaps felt guided to do so. I may be missing some great opportunities, but at the same time, I am beginning to see that I have also avoided a few minefields, given some of the information coming out at this time from several sources. Our politicians and media pundits love to throw statistics out as though they are proof to everything. As the saying goes, if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullshit. Branson continues, writing that there is a growing over-reliance on using statistics as an alternative to using judgment. While facts and figures are extremely useful, data analysis shouldn't solely drive every decision. The advertising guru David Ogilvy summed executives' reliance on statistics over judgment. They are coming to rely too much on research, and they use it as a drunkard uses a lamppost for support, rather than for illumination. One vital component of decision-making is that it is often overlooked, is quiet contemplation. After looking at all the stats, speaking to all the experts, and analyzing all of the angles, then take some time to yourself to think things through clearly. Take a walk, find a shady spot, or simply sit and think for a while. Don't delay unnecessarily, but don't rush either. Get that balance right, and you are far more likely to make the right call. Over the next few weeks, regardless of how things unfold, use the information that is available to help with assessing the situation, but then take the time, individually or as a group, to break away and reflect on the information before making any final decisions to act. Humans have been conditioned to react immediately, and it is often defensively, with varied degrees of fear. Be a leader who chooses not to follow this path and empower those around you to assess and serve rather than react and provoke. It is time to work together. The global banking cabal has been attempting to separate. That level of consciousness no longer applies, and we are witnessing it in events and in the hearts and minds of people worldwide, if one is willing to look for it. May each of you find the appropriate level of courage, strength, empowerment, peace, and love to lift up humanity and our planet to a consciousness vibration that reflects greater health, joy, protection, and abundance for all, until our next moment of now. So that is a sample of the unfolding higher consciousness news around the world this week. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary on the blog at cosmicvisionnews.com, on CVN's Facebook and Scene pages, CVN's YouTube channel, and also on Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that, in the words of the Dalai Lama, and as the Greeks are showing Europe, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito in the room. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosures unfolding all around you. Namaste.